Luca Fonzo. Luca Fonzo was born in 1924 in Bucau, Romania. He lived with his mother, father, and baby sister. When he visited his home for a break from college, he was captured by the Nazis and sent to Belzec concentration camp. After hearing about the murder of his family, Luca rebelled against the Nazis and was shot. Luca left behind his manuscript. It's my world, my heart, my everything. I've always wanted to write a book. I guess now I can. I never thought I'd be under these circumstances, but I'm only going to get one chance to say this, and I'm going to do it right. This is my autobiography. I was born in the year 1924 to a loving mother named Luluja and a respectable father named Yako. The atmosphere around our home was always a happy one. Mother loved to read and sing, and father was usually at work. He was a blacksmith. My childhood was fairly decent. My parents were one of the few gypsies that were better off, so they took to enroll me into school, hoping I would better myself and have a bright future. At the age of 5, I was in love with philosophies. My mother became a kind of daycare lady for our neighbors' children while they were out during the day doing who knows what. And when I came home, she would tell us stories, ideas that were intricate yet beautiful and vivid yet strong. I found myself marveling over the ideas, the stories that I caught my breath, and I'd feel the adventure and curiosity that has made me the person I am today. When I was 14, my baby sister was born. Her name was Sura, and she was the light of my parents and mine life. She was, to put it mildly, a happy baby. Her eyes sparkled with an ethereal glow. From a young age, my sister was always mischievous. I guess it ran in our family or something. It was one day, 2 years later, that I first noticed that the Nazis were on the move, and their next stop was our little part of our hometown, Bucau, Romania, if you don't know. I was at school at the time, and I happened to be glancing out of the window when I felt the heavy rumbling caused by the trucks that moved past me. They were headed in the direction of our Roma community, or gypsies, if you will, and setting a deep panic off within me. There were armored vehicles, and ones with open tops that carried soldiers with a red armband on, and guns. Their expressions gave me the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. When school got out for the day, I raced home at a vigorous pace. As I crossed the threshold of my humble home, I had noticed that I was rather too quiet. No sounds of my baby sister crying or giggling, no familiar smell of my mother cooking, or her tenor voice singing as she cleans. Not bothering to take off my shoes, I rushed in. My curiosity got the best of me, to find my parents leaning close to each other on the couch, their backs to me and heads bowed down to look at something that my mother held. I rounded the couch to see what had stolen their utmost attention, when I felt myself smiling a relieved smile as I noticed it was my sister. My parents lifted their heads simultaneously. It was then that I noticed it. It was then that I had decided that when I grew older, I would be a doctor. It was for my sister. It was always for her. Later that day, I learned that the Nazis weren't after our town, but they were just strolling through. If they weren't after us just now, then when would they be? It was later in the year 1943 that they came for us. That year I had gone to the capital. I had been accepted into university to live out my dream of being a doctor, and I was allowed a break to go see my family for the holidays. That holiday never came. Before I had arrived, the Nazis had taken hold of my community, my fellow Roma people and my family, and transformed it into a ghetto of some sort. When I had arrived, they had been very hostile towards me, and even very near killed me if it hadn't been for my limited German skills. A funny story, that is, but I can't tell it here. I suppose I could provide a shorter version, though. A friend at the university guilted me into taking a German class with him to impress a girl he liked. Who knew it would actually pay off? Oh, the irony. I was then reunited with my family, but only for a short while. It seemed that my sudden appearance had disturbed the Nazis, and they had wanted an immediate liquidation and move out, no questions asked. It took about 3 days before my street had to be packed and ready to go. The process was irritating and long, yet oftentimes I found myself hoping beyond hope that this wouldn't be anything too big, that I could hurry back to my studies. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved my family, and more importantly, I loved my sister. They had rounded us up and made us run for days, it seemed, with little water and only a piece of bread. Then, if that didn't seem to break enough of us, they had us practically thrown us onto a seatless train with about 80 people to a car. Space was dismal, water and food felt like they were non-existent, and my sister, 5 years old at the time, was a coughing fit. Every time she coughed, my heart ached, and I would try to bend down and whisper encouraging nonsense to her. Things like, "It's only just a bit now," or "Any minute we'll be there and you can drink as much and eat as much as you want, but just hold on for a little bit." After a while, it felt like I was saying that more to myself than to my sister. And finally, what felt like months, which was actually more like 10 days, the train came to a stop, and the doors were flung open with a great force. We looked onto a crowd that had suddenly appeared on the other side. A few people that had dirtied, striped, one-piece outfits, alongside a group full of Nazis. I blinked slowly, taking in my surroundings. There were gates in front of us, and buildings in the background with smoke billowing from the tops. Blinking again before I noticed that there were hands pulling at me, forcing me towards the buildings with the smoke. When I landed on the ground, I looked at my sides, wondering if my parents and sister had gone off before me, when I was shoved continuously from all my sides. I looked around with desperation now, not seeing them. Lost. I was lost, was all I could think. Suddenly, I spotted the blonde hair of my sister that I could just barely make out on top of my dad's shoulder. That was all I needed before I was off, pushing and shoving to get to them, my heart filling with relief and happiness at the sight of them. I could swear I'd never been happier. It felt like an hour before I finally reached them, but it would quickly become at least another lifetime before we could all be together again. We held each other, walking in a small group. My sister clutched onto my dad's head like a lifeline, one of her small hands covering her mouth to stifle her coughs. My mother had her arms around my dad's middle, clinging to him like a child, and half grabbing at me. My father looked unaffected, but with a closer look, you could see his eyes held a glint of worry in them. We were shoved to the front of the gates, and soon we were standing in front of a couple of SS soldiers. They were shouting in a way that sent chills down my spine, and their gazes held a certain ruthless look to it. Shouting in a foreign language that sounded vaguely familiar, they mentioned for some people to go left and other to go right. "Those who are sick, retarded, elderly, women, or weak, come this way," a voice called. Something in me snapped, and I could tell that what they were speaking was German. My parents were looking around desperately, looking for some kind of sign as to what they were supposed to do. I kindly translated, and then we came to a problem. My sister was sick, and none of us were. My mother remembered that they said women could go that way too, but my father refused. He didn't want us to be separated in a place like this. Taking initiative, I led my family up to a SS soldier and asked him for help. He ignored me and told me to get back into line before he had us all shot and fed to the dogs. I shakenly complied. We made our way back through the ever-growing crowd when I felt someone grab my arm and pull me to the side. I looked at my side and found it to be one of the people I saw earlier, in the striped one-pieces. "If you have someone that is sick and you have a doctor in the family, tell them and they will spare your lives," he said. I wondered how he knew that. Who was this person? "Who are you?" I asked. I stared at him, waiting for an answer, but I never got one. All he did was stare back with a knowing look in his eyes, seeming to tell me something, but I would never find out what that was. I blinked, coming out of my thoughts, and noticed the man was gone. I turned around to a call of my name, to see my family rushing up to me. I had told them what the strange man had said, and the feeling of relief that came upon us was unlike any other. We made our way back to the SS guard from the fort, but I couldn't quite make it. As the crowd was dispersing to either the left or the right, I locked eyes with him before I shouted, "I'm a doctor! I'm a doctor!" At first, I wasn't sure if he heard me or not, but I guess he did, since he started to talk with some other SS men and pointed in my direction. They came over shortly and asked me what I wanted. "My sister is sick," I said desperately, as if they would understand what I wanted. "So just send her along with the other sick. We have no time for you," they replied harshly. Astonished, I tried to